Sit down, please. Thank you all for that warm welcome. This is a great day for Central Texas. It's a great day because Laura and I have had the honor of welcoming the Putins to our beloved state. It's a great day because it's raining. It's a great day as well because I just got off the telephone with two Central Texas women, Heather Mercer, who used to live in Crawford, and Dana Curry. They both said to say thanks to everybody for their prayers. They realized there is a good and gracious God. Their spirits were high, and they love America. I remember clearly when I stood up in front of the Congress and said we have three conditions to the Taliban. One, release those who are being detained. Two, destroy terrorist training camps so that country can never be used for terror again, either against us or against Russia, for example. Three, bring Al-Qaeda to justice. Yesterday I was able to report to the nation that one of those conditions has been met with the release and rescue of the humanitarian aid workers. And make no mistake about it, the other two will be met, particularly bringing Al-Qaeda to justice. I wanted to bring President Putin to Crawford. I wanted him to see a state that Laura and I love. I particularly wanted him to be able to introduce him to the citizens of Crawford, because this part of the state represents the independent-minded nature of Texans. It represents the hard-working Texans, people who have great values, faith, and family. The people here, Mr. President, love their country, and they like countries that work with America to keep the peace. We had a great dinner last night. We had a little Texas barbecue, pecan pie, a little Texas music, and I think the President really enjoyed himself. I told him he was welcome to come back next August to get a true taste of Crawford. He said, fine, and maybe you'd like to go to Siberia in the winter. It's my honor also to introduce President Putin to Crawford. I bet a lot of folks here, particularly the older folks, never dreamt that an American president would be bringing the Russian president to Crawford, Texas. A lot of people never really dreamt that an American president and a Russian president could have established the friendship that we had. We were enemies for a long period of time. When I was in high school, Russia was an enemy. Now the high school students can know Russia is a friend, that we're working together to break the old ties, to establish a new spirit of cooperation and trust, so that we can work together to make the world more peaceful. Russia has been a strong partner in the fight against terrorism. It's an interesting story for me to report. I was on Air Force One the day of the attack working my way back to Washington via Louisiana and Nebraska, making sure that the president was safe and secure. First phone call I got from a foreign leader was President Putin. He told us that he recognized that I had put our troops on alert. I did so because for the first time in a long period of time, America was under attack. It only happened once, twice, I guess, War of 1812 and Pearl Harbor. In the old days, when America put their troops on attack, Russia would have responded and put her troops on alert, which would have caused the American president maybe to put a higher alert, and Russia a higher alert, and all of a sudden we would have had two conflicts instead of one, but not this president. This president recognized we're entering into a new era, and his call was, don't worry, we know what you're up against, we stand with you, and we will not put our troops on alert for the good of the United States of America. I brought him to my ranch because, as the good people in this part of the world know, that you usually only invite your friends into your house. I'll occasionally let a salesman in or two, but I wanted the Putins to see how we live, and even though we changed addresses, our hearts are right here in our home state. We've got a lot to do together. We've had great discussions in Washington as well as here in Texas. We're both pledging to reduce the amount of nuclear weapons, offensive weapons we have in order to make the world more secure. We're talking about ways to cooperate in anti-terrorism and anti-proliferation. We're talking about ways to make sure our economies can grow together. What we're talking about is a new relationship, a relationship that'll make your lives better when you get older, and it'll make your kids' lives better as they grow up. But in order to have a new relationship, it requires a new style of leader. And it's my honor to welcome to Central Texas a new style leader, a reformer, a man who loves his country as much as I love mine, a man who loves his wife as much as I love mine, a man who loves his daughters as much as I love my daughters, and a man who's going to make a huge difference in making the world more peaceful by working closely with the United States. Please welcome Vladimir Putin.
Дорогие друзья,
Dear friends,
когда мы сюда ехали, вот сейчас на машине,
when we're riding here on the presidential car,
я раскрою вам маленький секрет.
I'll divulge you a small secret of ours.
Первая леди Америки сказала, что вы знаете, здесь особый народ живет в
The
Техасе.
first lady of the United States told me, you know, some kind of special people lives here.
Это люди с особой гордостью, которые очень дорожат своим положением и гордятся тем, что они американцы.
These are people with a special kind of pride of their position and of their heritage.
Но чем больше я узнаю президента Соединенных Штатов, тем больше я понимаю, что она права, поскольку он тоже считает себя техасцем.
And the more I come to know the President of the United States, the more I realize that the First Lady was right. He is right from the heart of Texas, and he is a Texan.
И она, как мудрая женщина, таким образом еще и тонко похвалила своего мужа.
And herself, being a wise woman, she complimented her husband in an indirect and a very sensible way.
Мы со своей супругой тоже иногда пытаемся играть в пас, помогать друг другу. Я хочу вам представить свою жену Людмилу.
My wife and me are also trying. My wife and myself are also trying to help ourselves as we go along this life, and it gives me a pleasure to introduce my First Lady, my wife, Людмила Putina.
Я хочу так же, как и президент Буш, поздравить 3 жителей Техаса и 2 из этого маленького города с тем, что вооруженные силы, спецназ американский освободил их в Афганистане.
And like President Bush did, I would also like to congratulate 3 Texans and 2 people from Waco with the liberation by the U.S. Special Forces and their withdrawal from the land of Afghanistan.
Конечно, очень важно родиться под счастливой звездой, и очень важно, чтобы судьба была каждому из нас благосклонна.
Of course, it is very important to be born under a happy star and to have a destiny facing your way.
И действительно, я согласен с президентом, наверное, Господь помог им.
And indeed, I'm in agreement with the President. Perhaps God was looking quite positively on this.
Но есть разные подходы и к этой проблеме.
But there are different approaches to addressing such kind of problems.
Есть люди глубоко верующие, и которых нужно и можно уважать. Они говорят, Бог сам знает, Он сам определит, какова будет судьба страны или конкретного человека.
There are people deeply religious who usually say that God knows what is to befall a nation, a people, or a person.
Но есть люди, которые верят в Бога не меньше, но которые считают, что человек и народ должен влиять на свою собственную судьбу.
But there are people no less devoted to God, but who still believe that the people, a person, should also take care of their own destiny and lives.
Я думаю, и мне очень приятно иметь дело с таким партнером, как президент Буш, который говорит и делает то, что он говорит.
And it gives me a great pleasure to deal and to work with President Bush, who is a person, a man, who does what he says.
И я поздравляю освобожденных. Я поздравляю освобожденных и их родственников. Хочу поздравить и президента Буша с этим. Это его заслуга.
And I congratulate those who's been liberated by the armed forces and their relatives, and also I would like to congratulate on this President Bush.
Когда мы сюда ехали, должен сказать, что мы не ожидали, что все будет так тепло и по-домашнему, как это было вчера на ранчо президента.
On our way here, we didn't expect at all that things would be so warm and homely as they were at the ranch of President Bush here.
И вчера был один подарок, и сегодня встреча с вами – это еще один подарок для нас.
Yesterday, we've had a surprise, but today's meeting is yet another and very pleasant surprise indeed for us.
Потому что действительно, все-таки в любой стране, основу любой страны составляют не только те люди, которые живут в крупных столичных городах. Основа любой страны – это люди, живущие на удалении многих сотен и тысяч, может быть, километров от столичных центров.
Indeed, in any country, the backbone of any country is not only the people who live in the capitals, but mostly also and mostly the people who live hundreds and thousands of miles from their capitals.
Мне особенно приятно быть сегодня здесь, в вашей школе.
It is especially pleasant and pleasing for me to be here in your school, high school.
Потому что именно пребывание здесь позволяет вспомнить о выдающихся русских американцах, которые внесли свой вклад в развитие вашей страны.
And my being here brings me to remembering those distinguished Russian Americans who contributed so much to the development and prosperity of this nation.
Это и выдающийся музыкант и композитор Рахманинов.
Including a world-known composer and musician Rachmaninoff.
Это выдающийся изобретатель самолетов и вертолетов Сикорский.
a well-known designer and inventor of aircraft, helicopters and airplanes, Sikorsky.
Это выдающийся экономист, лауреат Нобелевской премии Василий Васильевич Леонтьев.
And a world-renowned economist and Nobel Prize winner, Leontiev.
И многие-многие другие.
And many others.
Очень приятно, что сегодня в этом зале находятся и мои соотечественники, ребята из России, которые приехали сюда учиться по обмену.
And it is extremely pleasant for me to know that here in this room we have some people, boys and girls from Russia, who have come here to study.
Конечно, в крупных столичных центрах работают серьезные люди, и от них много зависит.
Of course, serious people work in the capital cities and much depends on them.
Но они при любой ситуации должны выполнять волю народа своей страны.
But in any circumstances and in any situation, what they must do is to fulfill the will of their peoples.
И я, пребывая здесь, будучи здесь, чувствую, что воля американского народа выражается в желании сотрудничать с Российской Федерацией, сотрудничать с Россией. Могу вам со стопроцентной уверенностью гарантировать и сказать, что те же самые настроения имеют место и среди российского народа.
And being here, I can feel the will of these people, the will to cooperate with the Russian Federation, the will to cooperate with Russia. And I can assure you that the Russian people fully shares this commitment and is also committed to fully cooperating with the American people.
И вместе мы... А вместе мы можем очень многое сделать. Особенно, если с нами будут такие молодые, такие красивые люди, которые сидят в этом зале. Спасибо вам большое.
Together we can achieve
Желаю вам
quite a
всего самого
lot,
доброго.
especially if we are helped in this by such a young and active and beautiful generation as the one we are meeting with now. Thank you very much.
Good job. Very good job.
Thank you.
Okay. The President and I have agreed to take a few questions from the students. I figured this would be a pretty good opportunity for you all to ask.
Только вопросы не по математике.
Only questions.
No math
No math
questions.
questions, please.
Good idea. Particularly no fuzzy math questions. Anybody got any questions? Yes, ma'am. Hold on, we got a mic coming so everybody gets to hear it, too. What is your name and what grade are you in?
Amanda Lemons, I'm a
Senior, good.
yeah. Have you decided on whether you were going to go to Russia or not?
Well, the President invited me, and I accepted. We haven't figured out a time yet, but in that I'm from Texas and kind of like the warm weather, I was hoping to wait a couple of months. I'm really looking forward to going to Russia. I would hope that I could not only go to Moscow, but maybe go to the President's hometown of St. Petersburg, which they tell me is one of the most spectacular cities in Europe. But I look forward to going. I think it's going to be a very important trip. We have met 4 times now. We've made a lot of progress on coming together on some key issues. There's more work to be done. I believe the U.S.-Russian relationship is one of the most important relationships that our country can have. And the stronger the relationship is, the more likely it is the world will be at peace. And the more likely it is we'll be able to achieve a common objective, which is to defeat the evil ones that try to terrorize governments such as the United States and Russia. And we must defeat the evil ones in order for you all to grow up in a peaceful and prosperous world. Okay, wait for the mic. I'm kind of getting hard of hearing.
My name's Jana Heller, and I'm in the 8th grade. And I was wondering, what is President Putin's favorite thing about Texas?
What's he think about Texas?
Yes, sir.
Oh, favorite thing. Crawford, of course.
Мы знаем, что в России давно знают, что Техас самый важный штат Соединенных Штатов.
We in Russia have known for a long time that Texas is the most important state in the United States.
Но если говорить совсем серьезно, у нас действительно знают в России, как это вам не покажется странным, Техас лучше гораздо, чем все другие штаты Соединенных Штатов.
But seriously speaking, we in Russia somehow tend to know about Texas rather better than about the rest of the United States somehow.
Но за исключением Аляски, которую мы вам когда-то
Except
подарили.
maybe for Alaska, which we sold to you.
Потому что, во-первых, здесь, так же, как и у нас в России, очень развита нефтяная промышленность, это вполне серьезно, и много контактов в этой сфере.
In my view, first of all, because like in Russia, here in Texas, the oil business is quite well developed and we have numerous contacts in this area.
И очень много контактов в высокотехнологичных сферах, в сфере освоения космоса.
And we have very many contacts in such areas as high tech and the exploration of space.
То, что техасский парламент принял решение и объявил день 12 апреля, день полета Юрия Гагарина в космос, нашего соотечественника, праздничным днем, для нас самих у нас самих это национальный праздник, лишний раз подтверждает близость Техаса и России.
And the fact that the Parliament of the state of Texas declared the April the 12th, the day when Yuri Gagarin, the first man to fly to space, accomplished this as a state holiday, like it is a national holiday in Russia, is yet another testimony of the closeness of our outlook and achievements.
Very
Thank
good.
you.
Name and grade?
I'm Brian Burks. I'm a senior here. In what ways has this summit helped bring Russia and U.S. closer together?
Well, first of all, his question is, in what ways have the summit brought us together? Well, in order for countries to come together, the first thing that must happen is leaders must make up their mind that they want this to happen. And the more I get to know President Putin, the more I get to see his heart and soul, and the more I know we can work together in a positive way. And so anytime leaders can come together and sit down and talk about key issues in a very open and honest way, it will make relations stronger in the long run. There's no doubt the United States and Russia won't agree on every issue. But you probably don't agree with your mother on every issue. You still love her, though, don't you? Well, even though we don't agree on every issue, I still respect him and like him as a person. The other thing is that the more we talk about key issues, the more likely it is we come to an understanding. And so the summit enabled us to continue a very personal dialogue. As well, we agreed to some significant changes in our relationship. After long consultations with people inside our government, I announced that our government was going to reduce our nuclear arsenal to between 1,700 and 2,200 warheads over the next decade. That's a tangible accomplishment. I shared that information with President Putin. He too is going to make a declaration at some point in time. In other words, this particular summit has made us closer because we've agreed on some concrete steps as well, specific things we can do together. We're working on counterproliferation, which is an incredibly important issue, to make sure that arms and potential weapons of mass destruction do not end up in the hands of people who will be totally irresponsible, people that hate either one of our nations. And so we made great progress. And I look forward to future meetings with the President, because there's more to do to make sure the relationship outlives our term in office. It's one thing for he and me to have a personal relationship. The key is that we establish a relationship between our countries strong enough that it'll endure beyond our presidencies. And that's important so that in the long run, as you come up and as your kids grow up, that Russia and the United States will cooperate in ways that will make the world more stable and more peaceful, and in ways in which we can address the common threats. And terrorism and evil are common threats to both our governments, and will be tomorrow as well as today, unless we do something about it now. And that's exactly what we're doing. You want to answer how a summit? You want to answer how a summit makes us president? Okay. Yes, ma'am. Ask the President a question. The other one.
We, as women in America, are very appreciative of all the rights we have. So, as the fall of the Taliban government, how do you think that the women's right will affect Afghanistan?
How do I think what?
How do you think the fall of the Taliban government will affect the women's rights?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm going to answer it quickly, and then I want Vladimir to discuss that. He knows about women's rights and the importance of them because he's raising 2 teenage daughters. He and I share something in common. I'll tell you an interesting story, and then I'm going to let him speak about it. First of all, there's no question the Taliban is the most repressive, backward group of people we have seen on the face of the earth in a long period of time, including and particularly how they treat women. But President Putin, I think it would be interesting for him to discuss the concept of women's rights inside of Russia and his vision of how Afghanistan treats women. But I'll tell you an interesting story. So we're getting ready to have the first press conference we had together in Slovenia. And by the way, there's, I think, 1,000 reporters there. It seemed like 1,000. And we were walking in. I said, say, I understand you've got 2 daughters. He said, yes. He said, they're teenagers. I said, I've been through that myself. I said, who'd you name them for? He said, well, we named them for our mothers. My mother and my mother-in-law. I said, that's interesting. That's exactly what Laura and I did, too. We named our girls for my mother and Laura's mom. And I said, gosh, the thing I want most in life is for those girls to be able to grow up in a free world and prosper and realize their dreams. He said, that's exactly what I hope as well. There's a lot in common, even though between our countries, even though it's a long way away. And it all starts with the human element, the thing that matters most in life, and that is our faiths and our families and our respective loves as dads for our daughters. But anyway, I think it'd be appropriate for President Putin to talk about women in Russia and his keen desire, like mine, to free the women of Afghanistan as well.
Я согласен с президентом по поводу того, что такая проблема в мире существует.
I do agree with President that indeed such a problem does exist in the world.
То, что мы видим в Афганистане, это крайние проявления. Там вообще, к сожалению, женщин и не считают за людей в полном смысле этого слова.
And in Afghanistan, this phenomenon has taken an extreme form, and the disrespect of human rights has acquired extreme dimensions. Overall, women in Afghanistan are basically not treated as people.
И сегодня, как вы знаете, в освобожденных районах женщины снимают с себя чадру, жгут ее и так далее. Это говорит о том, как народ воспринимает то, что сейчас происходит в Афганистане.
And a testimony of the people's attitude towards this problem, this issue in Afghanistan, is that in the liberated areas, people burn their veils, or as they're called, chadoras. This is the testimony of the attitude of the people towards this in Afghanistan.
Но во многих странах мира, тем более в бедных странах, существует проблема, связанная с женщинами, много проблем. И здесь целая программа должна быть подготовлена, которая бы меняла ситуацию, начиная с проблем образования девочек.
In many countries of the world, especially in the poor countries, this problem exists and has acquired quite dramatic dimensions. To overcome this, one needs to develop specific gender-oriented program that would include primarily and first of all questions related to proper education for women.
Существует, повторяю, много программ и много людей, которые борются за осуществление этих программ и достижение определенных целей.
And I would like to reiterate, there are many programs and many people devoted to implementing such specific special activities for the benefit of women.
Но чего мы должны бояться и чего мы не должны допустить.
And we should not allow any atrocities or violations of human rights to happen.
Это чтобы в результате осуществления этих программ и в результате достижения целей, которые люди перед собой ставят в этой сфере, женщина не превратилась в мужчину.
But what we should avoid in the course of the implementation of such programs and as an end result of their implementation is that a lady would turn into a man.
At the end of the war, do you foresee the United States and Russia being involved in the new implementation of a government in Afghanistan?
I do. I think, and it started yesterday in my house in Crawford, where the President and I had a very long discussion about how to make sure that the post-Taliban Afghanistan accomplished some certain objectives. One, that it be a peaceful neighbor to everybody in the region. Secondly, that it never harbor and serve as a training ground for terrorism again. And third, that it be a country that doesn't export drugs. I don't know if you know this or not, but the Taliban government and Al-Qaeda, the evil ones, use heroin trafficking in order to fund their murder. And one of our objectives is to make sure that Afghanistan is never used for that purpose again. And so we had a long discussion about a post-Taliban Afghanistan. The President understands, like I do, that any government, in order for it to achieve its objectives, must represent all the interests in Afghanistan, not only the Northern Alliance, which has been very effective fighters on the ground, but also the Pashtun tribes, which are generally in the southern part of the country. And we are working to figure out a strategy to make sure that that happens. There's three phases to this battle in Afghanistan. One is bringing Al-Qaeda to justice, and we will not stop until we do that. That's what people need to know. Secondly is to make sure that the good hearts of the American people and the Russian people and people all over the world are effective. And by that I mean that we get the aid to the starving folks in Afghanistan. By the way, they were starving prior to September the 11th because of the Taliban government's neglect. And we're doing everything we can to make sure we get food and medicine into the regions. Part of the problem has been the Taliban. They've been stopping the shipments of food, believe it or not. It won't surprise the President because he understands how evil they are. We're just learning how evil they are in America. The other problem is to make sure that the distribution lines are now open so that we can get food not only from places like Mazar-Sharif that we have now liberated, but from there into the remote regions of northern Afghanistan in particular. It's important that we do that. And so we're working hard to make sure that we accomplish that mission. And the third objective is to make sure that after we leave, that there is a stable government. It's part of the way we built our coalition was to assure Russia, who's got a particular interest in this part of the world, and other countries that we weren't just going to come and achieve a military objective and disappear. We were going to come achieve a military objective, but also help this country become a reasonable partner in the world, a country that's able to foster peace and prosperity for its citizens. And that's an important part of this campaign. It's important. It's also important that we stay the course and be strong, because the stronger we are as a coalition, the stronger we are in achieving our objective, it is less likely somebody else is going to try to harbor a terrorist. our objective is not just Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. Our objective is to root out terrorism wherever it may hide, wherever it may exist, so the world can be more free, and that's a common objective of the President in mind. Got a question for the President? Levels today to significantly lower levels tomorrow. And as well, most of our weapons are de-alerted. They're not alert. However, it doesn't take them long to fire up if we need them. Our mission is to make sure we never need them on each other. We need to get beyond the notion that in order to keep the peace, we got to destroy each other. That's an old way of thinking. Now we're working together to figure out ways to address the new threats of the 21st century. I'd like for the President to address that as well.
Во-первых, должен сказать, что мне приятно очень находиться в этой аудитории.
First of all, I'd like to say that it gives me great pleasure to be here in this room.
То есть даже непонятно, то ли мы в школе находимся, то ли в НАСА.
And it's not quite clear for me whether I'm here in the school or at NASA.
12 класс, это говорит о том, что в 12 классе все в порядке в этой школе.
Looking at the questions of the 12th graders, it comes to my mind that everything is fine with this nation and in this school.
That's right.
Существует действительно несколько вариантов поведения.
There indeed exist a number of scenarios of behavior in this situation.
Очень профессиональный вопрос вы задали.
And the question was quite professionally put, mind you.
Можно отвернуть боеголовки, положить рядом.
You can just dismantle the warheads and rest them by the weapons.
И иметь так называемый возвратный потенциал, то есть иметь возможность в любой момент навернуть ее назад.
And to preserve the so-called strike-back capability in order to be able to retaliate.
А можно уничтожить.
But one may, on the other hand, destroy the whole that arsenal.
Это предмет переговоров. Как мы будем поступать с этим, это предмет переговоров.
What do we do with those arsenals is subject to negotiations.
И результат его зависит от уровня доверия между Соединенными Штатами и Россией.
With the result of those negotiations depending on the level of trust between the United States and Russia.
Мы вчера ели стейк, слушали музыку, но в целом все это было направлено на то, чтобы повышать доверие между руководством наших государств и между нашими народами.
Yesterday we tasted steak and listened to music, and all of this with the single purpose and objective to increase the level of confidence between the leaders and the peoples.
И если мы дальше будем идти по этому пути, то мы обязательно найдем решение, которое будет приемлемо как для России, так и для Соединенных Штатов, так и для всего мира.
And if we are to follow this route further, we will certainly arrive at a solution, decision, acceptable both to Russia, to the United States, and indeed to the entire world.
Stanford, I'm a senior. As we go out into the world, do you have any advice for us?
Yeah, listen to your mother. I do. I think follow your dreams would be my advice. Work hard, make the right choices, and follow your dreams. The other thing is, you never know where life's going to take you. I can assure you, when I was a senior in high school, I never sat in an audience saying, gosh, you know, if I work hard, I'll be President of the United States. Didn't exactly fit into my vocabulary in those days. But you never know. You never know. Trust the Lord, too.
President Putin liked the barbecue last night.
Ask him.
Я просто не знаю, как можно делать такое мясо. Пока, кажется, такого не бывает.
Just I had hard time imagining how could a living person create such a masterpiece of cooking. Fantastic meat.
Я когда сказал президенту, говорю, такого, по-моему, не может быть. Он говорит, такого действительно не может быть. Исключение только Техаса.
And when I said so to the president, he said, indeed, this cannot be done except for in Texas.
Good job. I think, Mr. President, we ought to ask one of the Russian high school students for a question, please.
Maria Slavnova.
How old are you?
18. Владимир Владимирович, как вы думаете, вот эти новые отношения, потеплевшие между странами, между двумя самыми сильными странами мира, как они повлияют на экономику России и как на туризм в России и на стереотипы, которые сложились у Америки, России и о наших?
The question is to President Putin, what do you think, how the improved relations between the two countries would influence the Russian economy and the future prospects for the entire world and in general? What do you think of this?
Россия очень изменилась за последнее время.
Russia has changed greatly recently.
И сегодня экономика России находится в известном смысле на подъеме.
And today, the Russian economy is on the rise.
У нас рост экономики наблюдается гораздо выше, чем в среднем в мире.
The growth rates are considerably higher than the average for the world.
В прошлом году это было 8% с лишним, 8,3%. В этом году будет около 6%.
Last year, the growth rate was about 8.3%. This year, we're expecting the growth rates close to 6%.
Должен вам сказать, что в отличие от всех других переговоров в сфере экономики, Россия не ждет никаких преференций и ни о чем не просит.
I would like to say that unlike other economic negotiations and negotiators, Russia is not seeking and is not expecting any preferences or any free buys.
Мы даже долги международным финансовым организациям сегодня возвращаем в ускоренном порядке, быстрее, чем это положено по графику.
We even return the debts of Russia to the international financial institutions ahead of schedule.
России для того, чтобы нормально развиваться, нужно только одно.
Russia needs only one thing to develop normally.
Нормальные, стандартные отношения со всеми ведущими индустриальными государствами мира. И, конечно, прежде всего со Штатами.
We need normal, standard conditions and relations with all the leading economies of the world and primarily with the United States.
И нужно расчистить идеологические завалы прежних десятилетий.
And we have to get rid of the ideological barricades of the preceding decades.
Президент помогает.
And President is helping.
Thank you.
Let me tell you an interesting story. We've sent teams of our economic people over to Russia, and Don Evans, who is a Texan from Midland, Texas, who is now the Secretary of Commerce, came back and told me about an encounter he had. He met a young man in Russia who told him that 5 years ago he was really not a business guy, but he had a dream, and he realized that he could buy bread in Moscow and transport it to St. Petersburg and make a little profit, which was a pretty new concept for the Russian Federation. And as a result of working hard and having an environment which President Putin is working hard to create, which is an environment where there's a tax system that's fair, and by the way, they got a flat tax in Russia. He built his own business. He now owns a grocery store type business. To me, that's an example of where the reforms that the president's putting in place are making sense, where people can own something, own their own business, own their own land, own the opportunity, if you work hard, to be able to have a future that you dream about. And the president understands that. Our job as a country is to help where asked. If there's ways that we can work together for our mutual interest, we will do so. And so one of the areas where I think the average Russian will realize that the stereotypes of America have changed is that it's a spirit of cooperation, not one-upsmanship. That we now understand 1 + 1 can equal 3, as opposed to us in Russia, we hope to be zero. And it's just a different attitude in a different era. It's time to get the past behind us, and it's time to move forward, and that's exactly why we're here in Crawford, to show the world we are moving forward. A couple of more questions, then I got to go have lunch, and so does the President. Back there in the back.
My name's Sean Law. I was wondering if you've come to a conclusion about whether or not to deploy a national missile defense system.
Are you with the National Press Corps, or are you with you there? I noticed my friends in the National Press Corps are giving you a thumbs up. Huh? Oh, you're a debater. That's okay then. This is an area that we've had a lot of discussions about. As you might remember in the presidential campaign, I said in very plain terms that I felt the ABM Treaty, signed in 1972, is outdated. That the treaty was signed during a period of time when we really hated each other. And we no longer hate each other. That I view the treaty as something we need to move beyond. And I made this very clear to the President. He understands our position, that it is in our nation's interest, and I think his nation's interest and other peaceful nations' interest, to be able to explore the ability, to determine whether or not we can be able to deploy defensive systems to prevent people who might have weapons of mass destruction from hurting us, or holding us hostage, or being able to blackmail free nations. He'll be glad to give you his position. We have a difference of opinion. But the great thing about our relationship is strong enough to endure this difference of opinion. And that's the positive development. We found many areas in which we can cooperate. We've found some areas where we disagree. But nevertheless, our disagreements will not divide us as nations combine to make that need to combine to make the world more peaceful and more prosperous. So, Mr. President, if you'd like to address defenses, you're welcome to.
Я чувствую, что мы не зря приехали сюда.
I feel the time was not wasting by coming here.
Мы когда ехали, президент говорит, ну мы там общие вещи такие скажем. Он ошибался.
My the president told me that we'll just limit ourselves to generalities, but he was mistaken.
That's right.
Вы сейчас аплодируете сами себе.
You are applauding yourself.
That's right.
У нас цель одна. У России и у США одна цель – достичь безопасности для наших стран и для всего мира.
Our objective is a common, both for the United States and for Russia. The objective is to achieve security for our states, for our nations, and for the entire world.
Мы разделяем озабоченности президента Соединенных Штатов о том, что мы должны думать о возможных угрозах будущего.
We share the concerns of the President of the United States to the effect that we must think of the future threats.
И в этом у нас общая база, общая платформа для дискуссии.
And here is a common ground for our further discussions.
У нас есть расхождение в том, как мы полагаем достичь этой цели. Средства, методы достижения. Здесь у нас есть расхождение.
What we differ in is that we differ in the ways and means we perceive that are suitable for reaching the same objective.
С учетом характера и качества отношений между Россией и Соединенными Штатами, можно сказать, что при любом развитии ситуации это не приведет к напряжению ситуации между двумя государствами и в мире.
And given the nature of the relationship between the United States and Russia, one can rest assured that whatever final solution is found, it will not threaten or put to threat the interests of both our countries and of the world.
И мы будем продолжать дискуссию.
And we shall continue our discussions.
This is the last question.
My
And then what we're going to do is we're going to walk around and say hello to everybody, and then we're going to go back to the ranch. Yes, ma'am.
name is Judy Swinson, and I'm in 7th grade.
7th grade.
And
Good.
if you do go to Russia, are you going to be taking some kids from Crawford?
No.
Можно? Я вам очень благодарен за этот вопрос.
I'm extremely grateful for you for this question.
Аудитория начала с этого вопроса практически, и вы закончили этим вопросом.
The whole audience basically started on this note, and you finalized the whole thing with your question.
Это не случайно.
This is not a mere coincidence, I believe.
Мне президент говорит, приезжай, когда у нас здесь плюс 40, я тебя запишу в клуб. Я здесь создал клуб 40. Мы бегаем, когда 40 градусов жары, мы здесь бегаем несколько миль.
When on our way here, the president invited to come here when it's plus 40 Celsius, more than 110, and he invited me to join a plus 40 club who jog when it is 110 and more.
Я подумаю еще.
Well, I'll think about it.
Но у нас действительно в некоторых регионах страны, там, где люди живут, в Сибири, вот в этом году, допустим, прошлой зимой, температура 2 недели держалась минус 50.
Indeed, in our country, there are regions where people live, by the way, in Siberia, where for last year, for 2 weeks in a row, the temperatures were around or below minus 50 Celsius for 2 weeks running.
Я вам обещаю, что я в такие условия президента не помещу в Россию.
My promise is I will not terrorize your president with such low temperatures.
Но теперь мы будем рады видеть любого из здесь присутствующих в России.
And would be glad to see any of you present here in Russia.
Но я сейчас хочу обратиться прежде всего к нашим хозяевам, к школьникам, к молодой аудитории.
But first of all, I would like to address here at this juncture our hosts, the school children, the young audience here.
Кто хочет, чтобы президент поехал в Россию, прошу вас на счет 3 сказать «да». Yes.
At the count of 3, those who want your president to come to Russia, raise your hands and say yes.
1, 2, yes.
Thank you all. Very good night.